Engineers activated the space travel portal and launched a focused beam through the gate. The device opened a bright conduit to an unknown realm, and people celebrated the breakthrough. They soon discovered the far side was occupied by living creatures. Beasts and monsters poured through the breach and swarmed settlements at once. Human weapons and much technology failed against the new world. Cities and outposts were overrun and survivors scattered. Humankind fell to the bottom of the food chain and lived under clans of predators. Landscapes burned and ruins marked former towns while scattered groups regrouped. Despite the collapse and loss, human will remain strong in small bands, prepared to survive in a world where their tools no longer worked. After the collapse, humankind sought new means to survive and fight back. It began with the first monster eater who consumed a beast and seized its soul. Bodies changed and fire and pain reshaped human flesh and bone. They learned to harness the beast souls and to graft new powers into genes. Hunters tracked beasts and ripped their essences to fuel evolution and war. For 100 years, the change spread through clans and bloodlines. Some became predators rivaling the beasts they once feared. Others rose into forms that bent the rules of life and death. The promise was stark and brutal: survive by evolving or perish under claws. Humans named the new order God's sanctuary and pressed onward into the changed world. Humanity had rebuilt itself by harvesting beast souls and grafting powers into bloodlines. Clans and hunters learned to hunt beasts and to seize their essences. Those who adapted became predators or took forms that defied life and death. Into that harsh order, Hansen arrived, claiming to be an unevolved human. He announced his name aloud and admitted his lack of grafted power. He had been in the district only a month, yet already drew sharp attention. Mounted pursuers rode forward shouting orders and urging their beasts to chase. He darted through alleys and then struck with a blinding orange arc. The attackers believed he had stolen a beast's soul they sought to obtain. That theft had made him a marked target for hunters and clans. He fought to escape while warriors closed on him from all directions. Mounted hunters crowded the alley and urged their beasts into a dusting cloud. The armored man struck with a blinding orange arc that scattered smoke and bodies. The pursuers accused him of stealing a beast's soul and shouted as they closed in. A green strike answered, colliding with the arc and lighting the street. He thought like a predator and voiced the harsh rule that only victory meant life. Anger flared and he swore he would not yield to death. His voice broke into a raw expletive before the panel fell to black. A caption then labeled the moment 1 month earlier and shifted the scene backward. He stood before the steel armory sanctuary and admitted he had long yearned to enter. The page closed by naming him the newest rookie Hansen, still unproven and already hunted. On his 18th birthday, he reached the legal age and took the portal to the city. He stood before the steel armory sanctuary and confessed he'd long yearned to enter. He did not come for glory because God's sanctuary was dangerous and unforgiving. As his narration continued, he explained his family had fallen into hardship. His father had died and his mother worked from dawn until dusk to survive. He became the sole breadwinner and chose God's sanctuary to earn money honestly. A talented high school graduate, he still lacked college but offered useful skills. He believed the sanctuary's doors could change his fortunes because anything was possible there. Down a sunlit street, he watched a stranger pass wearing what looked like an armor-type beast soul. Onlookers murmured their envy while he reminded himself why he had come. He had arrived in the city at 18 and sought entry to the steel armory sanctuary to support his mother. He kept watching others flaunt beasts' souls while he clung to hope. Later, his left eye began to twitch and a golden gleam showed in the pupil. He paused in a narrow alley to inspect a faint portal veil along the wall. The veil pulsed and green motes circled. Without warning, a massive white beast surged through the opening and filled the corridor. Hansen staggered back as the creature landed, fur crackling with energy. He shouted a curse, shocked and unprepared for the sudden summoning. He arrived in the city at 18 and tried to enter the Steel Armory Sanctuary to help his mother. He watched others flaunt beast souls while he kept quiet and hoped. His left eye began to twitch, and a faint golden gleam appeared in the pupil. In a narrow alley, he paused to inspect a thin veil along the wall. The veil pulsed and green motes stirred before a portal opened without warning. A massive white beast surged through the opening and filled the corridor. Hansen staggered back as the creature landed, its fur crackling with energy. He spat a curse and swiftly drew a blade glowing with blue lightning. He lunged forward and shouted for the beasts to eat his blade. The blade sliced into thick fur and released sparks and a shockwave. The impact drove the creature toward the alley mouth and scattered nearby people. Hunters and bystanders froze at the edge of the scene and watched. The portal rim pulsed once more as the corridor filled with ringing light. After the portal rim pulsed, the corridor filled with ringing light and thick mist. The blast forced everyone back, and a woman with silver hair stumbled from the haze. Hansen watched as the light struck her lower back and left a glowing wound. The crowd first murmured, then broke into loud, shocked recognition. Voices called her Chin Kshuan and questioned whether she had been stabbed in the butt. Some bystanders praised the attacker as bold, while others hissed at the insult. Hunters moved forward cautiously and held the perimeter at the alley mouth. Silence fell briefly when the name was shouted aloud. Hansen felt a churn of guilt and steady resolve as people watched the strongest woman revealed wounded. The portal behind them dimmed, and the city braced for what came next. The portal rim pulsed, and the corridor filled with ringing light and mist. The blast had forced everyone back, and a silver-haired woman stumbled from the haze. A glowing wound marked her lower back, where the light had struck earlier. The crowd first murmured, then broke into shocked recognition and crude laughter. Voices named her Chin Kshuan and mocked the attacker with obscene jokes. Hunters moved forward carefully and held the alley mouth as a perimeter. Hansen felt guilt sharpen inside him and a steady resolve grow. Chin Kshuan fell silent, then spun with fierce eyes and a trembling voice. Bystanders shouted crude names and praised the stabber as bold and lucky. She roared for the coward who had stabbed her and challenged him. Men surged forward and encircled her, vowing to punish and draw blood. The portal behind them dimmed while the city braced for the coming fight. The portal rim still leaked pale light as footsteps hit the alley floor. Chin Kshuan stepped forward and faced the young man alone in the alley. She raised her voice and announced anyone who helped him would be her enemy. Hunters tightened the perimeter, while bystanders formed a jeering circle around them. Hansen watched her and felt guilt sharpen, then resolve harden in his chest. His eyes widened as men surged forward and closed distance with angry faces. They cried insults and promised to hurt him with coarse voices and fists. Chin Kshuan kept her posture firm and dared anyone to step against her. Behind them, the portal dimmed further, and the city braced for violence. Shouts carved the air, including coarse curses and threats to kill him. The portal rim still leaked pale light as a hostile ring formed in the alley. Chin Kshuan had moved forward and warned anyone aiding him would become her enemy. Hunters tightened their perimeter, while bystanders closed in with jeers and threats. Hansen watched with guilt sharpening, then resolve hardening, then panic overtook him as the crowd surged. He recoiled at the thought that he had stabbed Chin Kshuan in the butt, and dread flooded him. He shouted that it must be a nightmare and that he had seen a ghost. His voice shredded the air while he clutched his head and staggered. The ground slipped away and he began falling through a clouded sky, limbs flailing. Streaking wind and rain-like lines dragged him downward as he begged to wake up. The portal rim still leaked pale light, and a hostile ring had formed in the alley. Qin Xuan moved forward and warned anyone aiding him would become her enemy. Hunters tightened their perimeter, while bystanders closed in with jeers and threats. Han Sen watched with guilt sharpening, then resolve hardening, but panic overtook him as the crowd surged. He shouted that it must be a nightmare and that he had seen a ghost, then clutched his head and staggered. The ground gave way and he fell through a clouded sky, limbs flailing. He landed by the steel armor sanctuary at the Tamarind Rocks and screamed. Black armored beetles attacked. He fought and killed many and received hunt notifications. The messages showed no beast soul and no gene gain. He devoured beetle flesh until he had eaten over 30, yet his gene points remained unchanged. A status panel confirmed his unevolved condition and stagnant gene totals. The portal still leaked pale light, and a hostile ring remained in the alley. Qin Xuan advanced and warned anyone aiding him would be her enemy. Hunters tightened the perimeter, while bystanders closed in with jeers. Han Sen's guilt hardened into panic as the crowd surged. He shouted that it was a nightmare and clutched his head. The ground gave way and he fell through a clouded sky. He landed at the Tamarind Rocks beside the steel armor sanctuary. Black beetles attacked and he fought until he had killed many. Hunt notices arrived but showed no beast souls and no gene gains. A status panel confirmed his unevolved condition and stagnant totals. Kneeling, he held beetle remains and measured the slow advance toward evolution. He calculated years might be needed to reach his first rank. He sighed and noted the low-rank flesh offered almost no chance of evolving, despite nearly a month inside God's sanctuary. The portal still spilled pale light, and the alley wore a hostile ring. Qin Xuan warned anyone aiding him would be an enemy, while hunters sealed the perimeter and bystanders jeered. Han Sen panicked, shouted, and fell through the sky into Tamarind Rocks beside the steel armor sanctuary. Black beetles swarmed. He killed many but gained no souls. A status panel showed his totals stagnant and unevolved. Kneeling over shattered carapaces, he remembered the copper-toothed monster that had nearly killed him and the months of recovery that followed. He resolved to find teammates so primitive hunts could yield progress. He muttered regret about stabbing someone, and a hidden observer narrowed their eyes as they watched him. The golden light ray had pierced the Tamarind Rocks plain and skittered across the ice-blue ground. Han Sen squinted toward the glow and heard distant insect chirrs that suggested motion. A status panel flickered into view and named the threat Black Armored Beetle. The beetle materialized with a polished shell and legs that clicked. Han Sen noted his soul totals remained unchanged and his evolution still stalled. He remembered the copper-toothed monster's bite and the long months of recovery that followed. He still resolved to find teammates for primitive hunts that would advance him. He tightened his grip and summoned energy along his arm. The status panel listed creature level and class, though specifics blurred by distance. Han Sen readied a blade and moved forward with controlled steps toward the light. A hidden observer kept watching from afar and narrowed their eyes as events shifted. A golden flare rested on the Tamarind Rocks plain and glowed over ice-blue ground. Han Sen squinted toward the light and heard insect chirrs suggesting distant motion. A status panel named the threat Black Armored Beetle as the creature materialized. Its polished shell reflected the glow, and its legs clicked across frozen rock. Han Sen noted his soul totals remained unchanged and remembered the copper-toothed bite. He tightened his grip, summoned energy along his arm, and advanced with a blade. The beetle crawled toward him, and he launched himself into a decisive strike. The impact split the carapace and spilled light. The hunt registered a success panel. The panel announced he had obtained a god's blood beast soul and possible gene points. An unknown watcher kept distance and narrowed their eyes as events unfolded. Hansen read the status column that stacked normal, primitive, mutant, and God's blood. He could not hide disbelief when the highest tier flashed God's blood in bright text. A description panel stated God's blood beasts were rare and respected within sanctuary circles. Hansen's expression shifted from surprise to calculation as he considered possible gene yields. He opened his own status window to confirm his unevolved state and the newly acquired beast soul. The screen labeled the soul god's blood and listed basic beast soul stats and identifiers. An unknown watched from a distance while Hansen planned his next move. He suspected such a soul could yield significant gene points and improve his standing. He decided to inspect the soul details himself, smiled, and launched upward in a slashing test. Hansen rose into the air and swung to test the newly acquired soul. His blow met empty space, but a shard of light answered and spun downwards. Golden fluid surged from the shard and wrapped his arm in hot light. Energy crawled across his back and torso and began to harden into plates. The fluid coalesced into a full suit of living armor around him. Light traced a helmet and visor that revealed a pair of red eyes. A humanoid silhouette stood fully formed and pulsed with golden motion. Hansen did not flinch as the armor linked to his spine and muscle. The manifestation matched his outline and seemed to wait for his command. An unknown lingered beyond the scene and watched the transformation in silence. Hansen rose and flexed to test the newly formed god's blood armor across his limbs. Golden fluid had wrapped his frame and linked with spine and muscle to form plates. The suit matched his outline and traced a helmet that revealed red eyes. He moved and felt the armor's weightless strength respond and reinforce his motions. He considered rank and rarity, then concluded the god's blood armor was far more lavish. The memory of primitive, ranked armors at the Steel Armor Sanctuary entered his mind. He admitted he had once stood in awe before such armors, but never expected this. An unknown figure lingered beyond the scene and watched the demonstration in silence. Hansen turned toward a cold blue cavern and prepared to move forward. Hansen thrust his armored arm outward, and the god's blood suit answered with force. Chunks of stone and ice shattered and flew as energy lanced through them. He examined the armor's response and felt its weightless protection integrate with him. He admitted he never expected to obtain a god's blood ranked beast's soul armor. Memory of primitive armors at the Steel Armor Sanctuary flashed through his mind briefly. A fierce smile spread across his face, and he spoke aloud with hungry pride. He vowed he would finally make a name for himself and pressed deeper into the cavern. His eyes glittered as he thought he would finally make a name for himself. In the distance, an observer watched the demonstration beyond the glare and remained silent. Hansen stood in the Steel Armor Sanctuary within his small room, a pot simmering on the stove. He had kept the god's blood armor memory tightly in mind and still savored its promise. Steam rose while he told himself the broth must not be wasted. He recalled that eating god's blood black armored beetle flesh had given 7 gene points. He planned to finish the soup, to press those gains further, and to train harder afterward. He moved to inspect a note pinned to the workbench. Then he checked a small object retrieved from the beetle's body. The object puzzled him. Its shape felt unfamiliar and possibly significant. He frowned and considered testing it before eating. From beyond the room's doorway, an unknown observer watched silently, posture unreadable. Hansen stood over the workbench and held the small glowing orb to his eye. He had kept the god's blood armor memory in mind and still meant to finish the soup. The orb looked alien and did not match the insect's remains he had dissected. He turned it slowly, searching for seams or markings while steam rose from the pot. Unknown watched silently beyond the doorway, posture unreadable. When Han Sen pressed the object between his fingers, it pulsed with cold blue light and made the room feel different. He flinched and spun toward a sudden noise, breath sharp as he called out. A caged beast moved in its cell and pressed its tongue against the orb's light, its eyes glowing as it made a wet sound against the metal bars. Han Sen had held the small glowing orb and examined it at the workbench earlier. He had kept the god's blood armor memory in mind as steam rose from the pot. When the caged beast swallowed the object, he cursed and urged the animal to spit it out. The creature then lay motionless, and Han Sen worried the orb had been lost. Cold blue light pulsed from the orb and spread across the cage bars. Green crystalline plates began to grow along the beast and formed into armor. The plates clicked and locked, sending shocks through the metal bars and floor. The cage groaned, bent, and then cracked under the emerging pressure. Han Sen stepped back, his eye widening as sparks ran down the bars. Unknown stayed beyond the doorway and watched the change without moving. He feared what the memory and the orb together might unleash inside the room. Han Sen had examined the small glowing orb at his workbench before the change began. Steam rose from the pot as he held the god's blood armor memory in mind. A caged beast swallowed the object and refused to release it despite Han Sen's curses. Cold blue light pulsed from the orb and green crystalline plates spread across the creature's flesh. The plates clicked and locked along its spine and head while shocks ran through the cage bars. The metal groaned and finally bent, allowing the armored beast to force its way free. It lunged at Han Sen without hesitation, and its jaws closed toward his face. A burst of blue energy erupted from within the maw and struck the creature, forcing it to recoil. Han Sen fell hard onto the wooden floor and rolled clear, while Unknown watched motionless beyond the doorway. Han Sen had been studying the small glowing orb at his bench when the armor memory activated. Blue crystalline plates spread along the beast's back and burst the cage bars open. The freed creature lunged, and Han Sen fell to the wooden floor as it recoiled. Someone stood motionless beyond the doorway and watched the struggle without intervening. A hunt notification declared success for a primitive jade killen and displayed rewards. Han Sen smiled and inspected the prize, then drove a dagger into the beetle's shell. He realized the black armored beetle had acquired God's blood grade due to the crystal. If the crystal could evolve creatures, Han Sen decided to use it on himself instead. He pressed the blue gem to his lips and swallowed, hoping to begin again. The observer remained at the threshold as the room fell silent. Han Sen had swallowed the blue gem, and the room had fallen silent while an observer lingered at the threshold. The focus then shifted outside his house, where relatives and neighbors had gathered on the yard. They encircled a widow and argued loudly about ownership of the old family house. Han Sen's second uncle, Han Lai, insisted she share or cede the property after 25 years. His wife pressed the point and noted the house's value exceeded 3 million. The husband of Han Sen's aunt backed the claim and demanded the family receive its inheritance. They framed their demand as fairness and practicality while asserting family rights. Luo Sulan listened without replying as the group amplified pressure to sell or vacate. The yard scene closed on a tense standoff that left the widow isolated and the family united against her. After Han Sen had swallowed the blue gem, silence lingered while an observer remained at the threshold. The focus shifted to the yard, where relatives crowded around Luo Sulan and her daughter Han Yan. Luo Sulan asked how her children would live if the house was sold. Qin answered with complaints about their own burdens and school fees. Han Lai stepped forward and demanded the house be sold within a month, pointing and threatening court action. His wife and other family members supported the demand and framed it as fairness. They left after a final insult while Luo Sulen clutched her child. An unseen figure watched from the edge as the yard settled into a tense, unresolved standoff. After Han Sen swallowed the blue gem, silence lingered at the threshold while relatives argued outside. Qin demanded the house be sold and listed debts and school fees. Han Lai issued a 1-month ultimatum and threatened court action before the family left after a final insult. Luo Sulen clutched Han Yan and pleaded about their future. Han Sen stepped into the yard and soothed them, saying he had arranged for Uncle Zhang and a lawyer to handle the dispute. He promised to take care of everything and to protect the house from seizure. Luo Sulen relaxed and thanked him. Han Sen watched the departing relatives, anger coalescing behind his eyes. He swore he would not let them off easy and that they would answer for their abuse. An unknown observer stayed at the edge, watching the tense yard. After the family dispute ended, Han Sen left for the Star of Lucia station. He entered the Steel Armor Sanctuary flagship hub and moved through the busy concourse. Passing commuters and glass walkways framed his path as he considered his options. Han Sen thought about the crystal's potential to push him toward evolver and transcendent ranks. He weighed God's senses, gene limits, and the need for mutation opportunities. He resolved to travel to Windfall Valley to pursue mutation trials and earn money. The first priority he named was competing in tournaments to secure funds and resources. An unknown observer remained at the yard's edge, watching him depart with a steady gaze. Han Sen also confirmed his legal plan with Uncle Zhang and the retained lawyer. He planned to use any winnings to protect the house and settle the dispute. Han Sen arrived in Windfall Valley under the Steel Armor Sanctuary sign and moved into the shaded grass. He pushed blades aside and found a battered helmet half hidden on the ground. Nearby, a small bowl held scattered fragments he had collected. He thought about his impulsive god's bloodshell suit and the value it might have fetched. He imagined selling that suit for 2 million, but knew it was gone now. He decided to sell half the fragments and to raise a few creatures to earn funds. He calculated sales and possible tournament gains to cover the family's house costs. The valley's quiet shifted around him as he made plans. His eye narrowed with resolve as he prepared to act. Han Sen moved through Windfall Valley and scanned the shaded grass for valuables. He spotted a faint shape among the blades and recognized a gale mantis hiding there. The creature unfolded, its serrated forearms and glowing eyes briefly flashing into view. Han Sen acknowledged how well such beasts concealed themselves and thanked his keen vision. A monster info overlay then appeared, labeling the mantis primitive and extremely fast. It listed serrated forearms as the weapon and the waist as the clear weakness. The specialty claimed that its forearms could slice through steel and could be deadly. The entry named its beast soul Serrated Gale Blade and emphasized its high attack speed. Han Sen weighed the mantis, threat against his plans to raise and sell creatures. He steadied himself, narrowed his focus, and prepared to capture or fight the mantis. Han Sen had been sweeping Windfall Valley for creatures and valuables. He found a gale mantis concealed among the blades and studied its monster info overlay. The overlay noted its serrated forearms, high attack speed, and a waist weakness. Han Sen weighed capture against risk and narrowed his focus to prepare. Suddenly someone nearby shouted, "You'll be my first kill," and lunged forward. The gale mantis unfolded its serrated arms and launched into the air. It struck with a sudden green slash that cleaved downward at armor. Han Sen's eyes widened in shock as the blade connected with his plating. The impact tested his defenses and forced him to shift tactics immediately. He steadied again, readying capture tools while watching the mantis' movements. Han Sen had been sweeping Windfall Valley for creatures and valuables. He located a concealed Gale mantis and reviewed its monster info overlay, noting serrated forearms, rapid attack speed, and a waist weakness. He balanced capture risk and readied his gear. A nearby voice shouted and a hunter lunged, forcing the mantis into action. The Gale mantis unfolded its serrated arms and launched a green slash that struck Han Sen's plating, testing the armor's integrity. He felt the impact and adjusted tactics immediately. He judged the mantis' power dangerous, yet his god's blood soul armor absorbed the blow. Han Sen seized the opening, countering with precise strikes and a decisive assault. The mantis faltered and crashed into the grass. Han Sen secured the kill and successfully captured the creature. A hunt success notification confirmed a primitive Gale mantis reward. He laughed at his advantage and declared that the armor would let him rule the world. Han Sen searched Windfall Valley and found a hidden swarm of Gale mantis. He reviewed the monster info overlay and noted serrated forearms and a waist weakness. He weighed capture risk and readied his god's blood soul armor to fight. The mantises attacked, slashing green blades that struck the armor's metal plating. Han Sen felt the impact and adjusted tactics with precise strikes quickly. He countered, severing mantis limbs and forcing one wounded creature to crash. Han Sen captured the defeated Gale mantis and claimed a primitive Gale mantis reward. A hunt success notification confirmed the creature and awarded a beast soul reward. He tested his armor during the clash and measured its absorption capacity precisely. Even a primitive mantis grade would suffice for one battle, he thought. The field settled, and Han Sen prepared to push deeper into the valley. Han Sen registered the hunt success notification for a primitive Gale mantis and reward. He advanced clad in God's blood soul armor and launched a burning slashing strike with ferocious speed. The attack sliced through wind and blade, striking the mantis's limbs directly. Han Sen felt impacts on the armor and shifted tactics with precise counters. His follow-through severed limbs and sent one wounded mantis crashing into grass. The HUD confirmed capture and displayed the primitive beast soul reward immediately. A field of tall grass shivered as hives deeper in the valley stirred. Green-winged mantises rose and descended in a dense vertical swarm toward him. Han Sen watched the hive movement and braced to push deeper into Windfall Valley now. Han Sen completed a burning slashing strike and cried, "Exterminated," as wind and blade met. The attack severed limbs and forced a wounded mantis into the grass. His HUD confirmed capture and displayed the primitive beast soul reward immediately. Tall grass along the valley shivered while distant hives stirred and rose. Green-winged mantises fell in a dense vertical swarm toward his position ahead. He braced himself and prepared to push deeper into Windfall Valley now. At the valley entrance, a lone man sighed and called himself unlucky. A caption identified him as Qin Xuan's subordinate, the rich kid Su Zino. Su Zino scanned the clearing and found no familiar sanctuary faces. He fantasized of serving Qin Xuan and imagined praise for finding a mutant beast. He resolved to search Windfall Valley for a mutant-grade monster to impress her. Han Sen had finished his burning slashing strike and captured a primitive beast soul. Distant hives had stirred, and green-winged mantises fell away from his position. Han Sen braced himself and prepared to push deeper into Windfall Valley today. At the valley entrance, Su Zino sighed and called himself unlucky. He scanned the clearing and failed to find any familiar sanctuary faces nearby. He fantasized about serving Qin Xuan and imagined praise for finding a mutant beast. Resolving to search Windfall Valley, he moved into the tall grass with caution. He noticed crimson bloodstains smeared across vegetation and trampled patches of soil. Nearby stone formations bore blackened cavities and scorch marks that suggested brutal force. He judged from the bloodstains that a fierce battle had recently taken place. He wondered whether an army had passed or a larger predator had massacred beasts. The valley fell strangely quiet as he advanced with measured steps and alert eyes. Hansen had already struck and stolen a primitive beast soul, leaving the valley strangely quiet. Suzino Gyuo moved through tall grass and examined bloodstains and scorched stone. He followed crushed vegetation to a clearing and froze at the sight. Dozens of Gale mantis corpses lay heaped across the ground beneath a lone silhouette. An armored figure stood on the mound and radiated silent menace. Suzino Gyuo stared and muttered that such carnage could not be the work of a single person. The figure answered with calm words and a price, offering the corpses for sale. Suzino Gyuo reeled between disbelief and calculation as the valley wind carried the armor's low voice. He weighed danger against opportunity and watched the stranger expectant and still. After the armored figure offered the carcasses for sale, Suzino Gyuo moved in to bargain. He asked for confirmation of the price and sounded incredulous at 1,000 levros each. Suzino Gyuo then produced bills and counted a stack as a down payment. The armored figure watched without changing posture and accepted the money with a flat reply. Suzino Gyuo framed the purchase as an investment for future profit and danger mitigation. The armored figure inspected the notes and commented on the buyer's wealth with dry amusement. Suzino Gyuo weighed risk against opportunity as the valley wind stirred the grass. The exchange ended as a tense agreement beneath the valley's still grasses. After the armored figure had taken the down payment, Suzino Gyuo stepped closer and introduced himself. He gave his sanctuary room number and asked where the armored figure lived. The armored figure replied only with a single obsession for money and repeated the word like a mantra. He then strode away through the grass, clutching the carcasses without further explanation. Suzino Gyuo laughed at the bluntness, found the name money fitting, and conceded he could not call a great man by his proper name. He brightened, called out a playful honorific, and promised to come by later. The armored figure did not turn back. Suzino Gyuo watched him recede and planned how the purchase might bring profit. After Suzino Gyuo had watched the armored figure recede, the figure climbed a rocky ridge. He surveyed a pocket of jagged stones where pale creatures nested among boulders. Rows of serrated teeth flashed in tight panels as beasts lunged from the dark. Their eyes glowed with cold cyan light, and they moved in ragged packs. The armored figure stood at the cliff's edge and measured their patterns. He had already collected carcasses. He did not speak or show fear. The beasts snarled and leapt down the slope with coordinated fury. Rocks and grass blurred as they charged the lone watcher without hesitation. The ridge held the armored figure briefly before the first beast reached him. A chorus of snarls filled the thin, cold air above the ridge. The armored figure unleashed a burning arc and cut through the charging pack. Beasts tumbled and shattered as orange slashes carved lines across rock and fur. Fragments and blood sprayed, several fell silent on the slope. System panels appeared announcing hunt success for multiple targets. He scanned each notification and then felt a sharp regret. He thought aloud that he had impulsively killed every Gale mantis nearby. He admitted he had not spared one to retrieve a rare crystal. Now he resolved to capture a live specimen on his next approach. Multiple reward lines showed items and experience plainly from his kills. He collected the tokens, but the crystal's absence weighed on his plan. The armored figure examined the newly acquired beast soul with eager, methodical curiosity. He invoked the soul and shaped it into a glowing copper-tooth energy weapon. A yellow beast form arced from his hand and nested along his forearm. He tested the weapon with a decisive swing that carved sunlight through air. Blades of liquid light traced wide crescents and struck rock with shattering force. System captions described the soul as primitive but weaponized and worth further research. He grinned and shouted praise, while adrenaline and curiosity pushed his pace. Despite earlier regret, his mood shifted to focused ambition and experimental hunger. He planned to refine the copper-toothed soul and duplicate its form in trials. He collected the data, tokens the system offered, and cataloged them for later study. The armored figure resolved to capture a live specimen next time and preserve it whole. Having cataloged the primitive soul, the armored figure planned further trials and live capture. Dawn light spread across the steel armor sanctuary's large gate and the valley beyond. Birds cut the sky while a wide plaza sat busy below the wall. Mounted units moved through the square in tight formation, raising dust and attention. Onlookers pointed and whispered as some named them the Shen Tianzi troops. Voices asked if something big was happening as people now pressed forward. Han Sen stood at the plaza edge with a companion watching the scene. Soldiers dismounted, and the crowd quickly tightened its ring around the formation. The armored figure remained distant and observant, cataloging the encounter for later study. Tension rose as rumors spread, and small clusters gestured toward the gate. Every movement was noted by watchers hoping to learn the troops' purpose. Morning light had reached the sanctuary gate as troops and citizens filled the plaza. Mounted units moved in tight formation while people pointed and whispered nearby. The armored figure stayed at the plaza edge cataloging movements for later study. Soldiers had dismounted and quickly formed a tight ring around the formation. Dust rose under hooves and drew strained attention from the nearby crowd. A white uniformed suitor rode forward and struck a vendor accused of selling primitive creatures. He shouted that no one dared sell such beasts in his presence. The strike sent the seller reeling and drew sharp gasps from bystanders. Han Sen watched from nearby and muttered that the man was disturbed. Other onlookers traded gossip, naming the rider Shen Tianzi and linking him to Qin Xuan. They expected swift retribution from the suitor and worried for the seller's fate. Observers recorded the incident and noted every movement for later study and strategic use.